Emily stood by the kitchen window, the scent of garlic and rosemary drifting from the oven, but her heart wasn't in the meal. The table was set for 3, though the house still felt empty. It always did lately. David was in the den, pretending to be working, though Emily knew he'd just be scrolling through emails until dinner. His presence had become more like background noise than partnership. Most of their conversations these days were about bills, grocery lists, or when his next trip would be. Tonight, though, was different. Marcus was coming. David's best friend since college, Marcus had always been the one with the easy smile and dangerous eyes. He had a laugh that filled a room and a confidence that never came off as arrogance. Emily hadn't seen him in nearly 2 years, not since he and his wife divorced and he moved across the state. She remembered how he'd winked at her playfully during their wedding toast. Not inappropriate, but noticeable. Enough to stick in her memory. When the doorbell rang, she didn't expect her breath to hitch. Marcus walked in with 2 bottles of red wine and a box of chocolates, joking, "Just in case dinner isn't as good as I remember." He hugged David, then turned to Emily. "You look exactly the same," he said, his eyes scanning her for a second longer than they should. "That's a compliment." Emily smiled, tucking her hair behind her ear. "Flatterer." Dinner was pleasant. They shared old stories, laughed over David's college mishaps, and toasted to surviving adulthood. David seemed relaxed for the first time in weeks. But Emily noticed the glances, Marcus's eyes lingering a little too long when she laughed, his subtle smirks when their knees brushed under the table. David didn't notice. He was too busy refilling Marcus's glass, too caught up in reliving glory days. Later that evening, David excused himself to take a call from a client in New York. It wasn't unusual. He worked late hours. Emily and Marcus were left alone in the living room, the sound of jazz playing low in the background. Marcus leaned back, swirling the last bit of wine in his glass. "You've built a beautiful home," he said. "Feels lived in. Comfortable." Emily smiled faintly. "We've tried." "You seem different," he said, turning toward her. "Quieter. Not how I remember you." She hesitated. "Things change." He watched her for a moment. "Or maybe things get buried." Their eyes met. There was an intensity in his gaze that made her feel exposed. She looked away first. The evening drifted on. Eventually, David came back, muttered something about being exhausted, and retreated to the bedroom. Marcus said goodnight and went to the guest room down the hall. Emily stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the empty wine glasses, replaying that look Marcus had given her. In her bedroom, the silence was too loud. She changed into her nightdress, climbed into bed, and turned off the light. But sleep didn't come. Her mind swirled. Marcus's voice, his words, that slightly rough laugh that used to annoy her but now felt like a reminder of something she'd lost. Somewhere past midnight, a sound stirred her. Soft creaking. A floorboard just outside her door. Not fast, not careless, slow, deliberate. Her breath caught. She didn't move. The doorknob shifted slightly, just a subtle turn as if testing whether she was awake. She turned onto her side, her heart thudding. The door opened a few inches, the hallway light casting a thin golden line across the floor. Her voice came out quieter than she expected. "Marcus." There was a pause. Then his voice, low and careful. "Sorry. Thought I heard something." He didn't step inside, but he didn't close the door either. Emily stared at that sliver of light, at the shadow just behind it. The house was still. The world outside had vanished. It was just her breath, his presence, and the buzzing tension that had been building since dinner. He stood there for a few seconds more, then pulled the door shut, softly, as if leaving her with a choice. A possibility. Emily lay still, eyes wide open in the dark, her skin tingling not from fear, but something else. Something she didn't have a name for. Yet. Emily woke the next morning with sunlight leaking in through the curtains, but her body still remembered the stillness of the night before. That slow creak of the floorboard. That quiet voice at her door. The way her heart had thundered, not with fear, but with curiosity. With anticipation. She told herself it was nothing. Just Marcus being polite, checking on a noise. But deep down, she knew there had been something else in the air, something unspoken. The morning passed normally. David brewed coffee and left early for a last-minute client meeting. He kissed her on the cheek like always. Routine. Distant. Marcus joined her in the kitchen a few minutes later, wearing a plain t-shirt and joggers, his hair still damp from the shower. He looked like someone who belonged there. Sleep okay? He asked, his tone casual. She nodded, watching the way he leaned against the counter, sipping from the mug she'd handed him. Sorry about last night, he added after a pause. Didn't mean to startle you. Emily looked at him, then quickly away. It's fine. I couldn't sleep either. There was a stretch of silence, not uncomfortable, but charged. He was looking at her again, and she could feel it. They spent the day pretending everything was normal. Marcus helped her fix the broken latch on the kitchen cabinet. He carried in bags of groceries when she returned from the store. They didn't talk about the moment at her door, but it hung between them like humidity in the air. Every glance, every accidental touch, everything felt like a test of what they wouldn't say. David called that afternoon, said he was staying at the office late and would probably crash on the guest couch. A late meeting, followed by drinks. Emily said okay with too little hesitation. When she hung up, Marcus was across the room, reading a book on the couch. He looked up. Their eyes locked. No words were exchanged, but everything shifted. That evening, they sat down to a quiet dinner, just the two of them. She lit a candle without thinking, and he raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The wine was opened. Music played low in the background, soft jazz once again. They talked, about memories, old music, missed chances, what ifs. She laughed too hard at one of his stories, and his smile lingered. After dinner, they moved to the couch. Marcus sat close. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that she felt the heat from his arm. Emily's heart was beating too fast, but she didn't move. Her body was still, but her mind was racing. She couldn't pretend this wasn't real anymore. He leaned back, turning to face her fully. You're not happy, are you? He asked quietly. The words struck a nerve. She didn't answer right away. She looked at her hands instead, then finally said, I don't know what I am anymore. Marcus exhaled slowly. You used to shine, he said. Back then. You were alive. You laughed with your whole body. What happened? I stopped being seen, she whispered, surprising herself. His hand brushed against hers. Not forcefully, just enough to make her aware of the warmth. I see you, he said. Emily's breathing shifted. The room grew smaller, warmer, quieter. She looked up. His face was close. Too close. I shouldn't, she said, but she didn't pull away. No, he agreed. You shouldn't. But neither of them moved. Their lips met, soft and searching. Once, then again, longer this time. Her hand rose to his shoulder as his fingers slid gently along her arm. The kiss deepened. The space between morality and desire blurred. There was no noise, no clock ticking, no world beyond that moment. They moved with a silent urgency. Not rushed, but desperate. Years of quiet disappointment melted under the weight of sudden attention, of being wanted. He didn't speak. She didn't stop him. Clothes slipped off without ceremony. The couch held more than just bodies, it held questions neither wanted to answer. Not yet. And when it was over, she lay still against him, her heart still pounding but her body quiet for the first time in months. He didn't ask her what it meant. She didn't offer a reason. There was only silence, breathing, and the knowledge that nothing could go back to how it was. Eventually, Marcus stood, retrieved his shirt, and left the room without looking back. Emily lay alone, staring at the candles still burning on the table. Something inside her had just been set on fire, and she didn't know if she ever wanted it put out. The next morning began like any other. Emily stood in front of the mirror brushing her hair, but her eyes didn't focus on her reflection. Her mind was blank, her body on autopilot. Behind her, the sunlight poured through the window as if it didn't care what happened the night before. Downstairs, she could already hear Marcus moving around in the kitchen, the faint clinking of dishes. The same hands that had touched her skin just hours ago now handled coffee mugs as if they were any other guests. As if nothing had happened. She stepped down the stairs slowly, each creak beneath her feet feeling louder than usual. Marcus turned around as she entered, offered a half smile. Morning, he said. His voice was neutral, casual, practiced. Emily nodded, but didn't return the smile. Did you sleep okay? Well enough. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at the table across from him. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was dense, packed with everything they weren't saying. Every glance felt loaded. Every pause, deliberate. She wanted to ask if he regretted it. If he was going to tell David. If she should. But she didn't ask anything. And Marcus didn't offer. David arrived home a little after noon, his tie half loosened, his face tired but cheerful. He kissed Emily on the forehead, smiled at Marcus, and began unpacking a file from his briefcase. "Hope you two didn't get too bored without me," he joked, oblivious. Marcus laughed. Emily didn't. She spent the rest of the day playing the role of a wife. A gracious hostess. A calm woman. But inside, something was unraveling. Every time David touched her arm, she felt herself flinch inwardly. Every time Marcus spoke, she heard not the words, but the memory of his breath on her neck, the weight of his body against hers. When Marcus finally packed up to leave that evening, the house became quieter. As he zipped his duffel bag, he looked at her, not long, not dramatically, just a look. A message. A shared secret. He hugged David tightly. "Thanks for the stay, man. It was good seeing you again." David patted his back. "Anytime, brother. Your family." Then Marcus turned to her. "Take care of yourself, Emily." She nodded. "You too." No handshake. No hug. No words that would give anything away. But her chest felt heavy as the door shut behind him. That night, David was more affectionate than usual. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe he had no idea what had happened under his roof. They lay in bed, side by side, the same bed she had once felt invisible in. Now she felt visible again, but for the wrong reasons. Her eyes stared at the ceiling, while David fell asleep beside her within minutes. She kept replaying it all. Not just the physical moment, but the before and the after. She didn't feel like she'd cheated just with her body. She'd cheated with her longing, her silence, her hunger to feel something again. Something real. And that made her wonder, was it ever really about Marcus? Or was it about everything David had stopped seeing? The next day came. And then the next. Time moved forward, like it always does, whether hearts are ready or not. Marcus never texted. Never called. But late one evening, Emily found an envelope slipped into the back of one of her cookbooks. A note. Just one sentence. "You deserve to feel alive." There was no signature. But she knew. She burned the note in the kitchen sink and watched the ashes scatter into the air. Weeks passed. She didn't confess. She didn't repeat the act. But she never forgot it either. Sometimes, while folding laundry or driving home from the grocery store, she'd remember the feel of his hand sliding over hers. The quiet heat of the room. The split-second moment where she could have said no, but didn't. She never told David. Not because she was afraid of losing him, but because she wasn't sure if she'd lost herself. The silence became part of her now. A second skin. Not heavy, not loud, but always there. Lingering. And on the nights when David stayed late at work and the house was dark again, Emily would stand by the window with the lights off, listening to the creaks of the hallway floor. Not waiting for footsteps. Just remembering the night they came. And how everything changed after that.